was built between 200 and 300 years after the flood. This means in that span of time, before the birth of Nimrod, the population of the world jumped from 1,500 to 600,000. The populations of Jasher 7 represent the sons of Ham as 49% of the world's entire population. Almost half the men on earth were sons of Ham. If we expounded that percentage and applied it to men currently walking the face of the earth, 3.7 billion people today would be sons of Ham. If we added together the populations of sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, India, and Southwest Africa, that population would equal around 3.6 billion. The representative population of Shem was 20% of the post-flood overall population. Shem had 300 sons of the 1,490 men on the earth at the time. If the same percentage of the world's population is related to the ancestry of Shem, that population would be approximately 1.4 billion today, which would leave the current lineage of Japheth around 2.2 billion. Adding the populations of Europe, China, Korea, and Japan together is actually just over 2.2 billion people. Of course, the ambiguity of racial classifications is intermingled throughout these areas of the world. Not every European is a Japhethite, just as not every African is a Hamite. These locations are geographic indicators of the genetic stocks of territorial dominance. But in the end, an entire continent's history has been completely hidden from the narrative of the progeny of men.
The Aboriginal American. Listen very carefully, because this has been done to you on purpose.
The Bering Strait theory is a long overdue misconception about world history. We know for a fact that the Americas were not first populated by migrating Asians. Furthermore, anthropological records indicate that Negroes inhabited the Americas prior to the Stone Age. Forensic paleontologists have examined fossil remains in several different areas on the North American continent that completely nullifies the Bering Strait theory. Fossil records show beyond any doubt that intelligent humans who were already using tools to perform tasks indeed inhabited the Americas long before the Bering migration could have possibly taken place. The fossil remains excavated were from a civilization that existed prior to the ice sheets melting that provided the corridor for Siberians to travel. This point extinguishes their accepted narrative without the frivolous use of illegitimate technology such as carbon dating. The answers scientists are looking for are preserved securely within the strata. The strata is determined by how deep within the earth remains are found. Using the organic matter around the fossil area, a natural timeline can be developed based upon that organic matter, so a date or age can be attached to said object. According to the top forensic paleontologists, the peopling of the Americas happened long before any academically accepted theory, which means the world of science knowingly promotes a fallacious theory and yet continues to press on in the wrong direction.
Wrong direction. Willful ignorance. It's not to their advantage to know the truth. They live in illusion. I keep telling y'all that these people live in illusion. What we feel like is lies they deem necessary. It's fucking sad. Yo, listen to this.
America was the first melting pot. From Clovis to pygmies to humans to large, fair-skinned, red-headed giants to women who stood over 12 feet tall, all of these remains can be found in the American soil. The great stories of biblical antiquity belong nowhere else on earth but in the Americas. Many of the biggest events ever to happen took place on the continent purposely mislabeled the New World. Long before these lands were invaded from the north, most all nations under the firmament inhabited these lands. Most of the nations residing on the continent were indeed encroaching upon the territories of Shem due to its abundance and wealth of resources.
That's right.
Here lived most of the civilizations that the world of academia attributes to the Middle East and North Africa.
That's a bold-faced lie.
The stories of scripture that have always been believed to have taken place on that side of the world instead happened in the Americas.
That's right.
Every race of men who once lived during the days of the Tower of Babel were scattered upon the face of the earth and forced by covenant into the land of their inheritance. Yet Canaan continued to dwell in the lands of Shem until the Canaanites were all driven off the land after the Exodus in the days of Joshua. It was at that time when all heathens were driven from the land and the nation became an independent, sovereign nation. Prior to all of this happening, the sons of Esau had left the land after Esau was beheaded and eventually fled to Chittim, an island in the Mediterranean. From that point on, Esau would intermingle with heathens. But before this, the lineage of Esau was a hybrid ancestry that included Horites, Canaanites, Hittites, and Ishmaelites. Genesis 36 says that Esau took a daughter from Elon and Zibeon. Both of these heathen nations are known as cave dwellers. These areas would eventually become Edom as they were driven out by Esau. The Horites were Canaanites and also part of the territorial infringement upon the land of Shem. Zepho, son of Esau, eventually became a prominent man of war while in Chittim, taking power and territories unto himself. Esau had vowed revenge against his brothers, the sons of Jacob. The seed of Esau reigned in Europe and aligned with the powers of Babylon. Those nations would eventually become the Romans.
Yup. Check this out. Your brother in Europe.
This testimony can be cited from the book of Obadiah, which reaffirms that Esau was indeed part of the hordes of invading heathens, and even was involved in the desecration and destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. In the prophecy about Esau, verse 10 states, "For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. In the day that thou stoodest on the other side, in the day that the strangers carried captive away his forces, and foreigners entered into his gates, and cast lots upon Jerusalem, even thou wast one of them. But thou shouldest not have looked on the day of thy brother, in the day that he became a stranger, Neither shouldest thou have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction. Neither shouldest thou have spoken proudly in the day of distress. Thou shouldest not have entered the gate into the city of my people in the day of their calamity. Yea, thou shouldest not have looked on their affliction in the day of their calamity, nor laid hands on their substance in the day of their calamity. Neither shouldest thou have stood in the crossway to cut off those of his that did escape. Neither shouldest thou have delivered up those of his that did remain in the day of distress. For the day of the Lord is near upon all heathen, as thou hast done, it shall be done unto thee, and thy reward shall return upon thine own head. By the end of the book of Obadiah, the Lord prophesies the complete annihilation of the lineage of Esau. Quote, and the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble, and they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord hath spoken it. Esau is the link between Neanderthal and the modern human. His lineage fled to the isles of the Gentiles and interbred with half men and half beasts.
Interbred. And that's why they look the way they look now. You see it?